Top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. We now know who newly crowned WBO flyweight champion of Argentina, Gabriella Alaniz, is going to be fighting. She's going to be facing veteran journeywoman of Venezuela, Deborah Rengifo. And Deborah is to the Central American boxing scene what Karina Kopinska and Bohana Lipizuska are to the European boxing scene. You know, she's that kind of journeywoman. Journeywoman level opponent, serviceable to a certain degree at a certain level, but whenever she steps up in class, some promising young fighter or some experienced veteran ends up kicking her ass. Sporting a professional record of 18 wins, 9 losses with 1 draw, 10 knockouts, having been stopped 4 times. 4 out of the 9 losses in Deborah Rengifo's professional record were knockout losses. She was knocked out by unified light flyweight champion Evelyn Bermudez of the Fighting Bermudez sisters. It was earlier this year in March. She has since fought 2 times. Once in June, then again in August. Gotten herself back in the winner's bracket. She's coming off of 2 consecutive victories. She's about to walk into another loss face first. Deborah Rengifo really has been around the block. Fought anyone from Evelyn Bermudez to Yo Castavalle. In 2018, she was stopped by Senicia Estriada. Go back a little further, she was stopped by Sandra Robles, Jessica Tutibap. If you saw what Gabriella Alaniz did to Tamara DeMarco for the WBO title, you'll know there's a good chance this fight don't go the distance. You'll know there's a good chance that Deborah Rengifo is likely going to get knocked out again this weekend. That makes this a showcase kind of fight for the newly crowned champion, a showcase kind of affair for Gabriella Alaniz, who really is the hardest puncher. There are 3 champions in the flyweight division. Unified champion Marlon Esparza of America, Leonela Paula Judica of Argentina, this division's longest reigning champion, and the newly crowned new kid on the block, her countrywoman, Gabriella Alaniz. And out of those 3 fighters, out of those 3 champions, Gabriella Alaniz is the hardest puncher among them by far. It's not even close. Marlon Esparza, a very educated boxer that comes from a very respectable amateur background. She's got skills, but she ain't got pop. She ain't got power. Leonela Paula Judica, she's been a champion for a very long time, very experienced, unbeaten, but she can't punch how Gabriella can punch. Out of the 3 champions at this weight, Gabriella is the strongest puncher among them. For this reason, that Rengifo fight is likely going to end in a knockout, a violent knockout. I don't think this one goes the distance. Something very similar applies to this weekend's Matchroom show that features unbeaten up-and-comer, unbeaten southpaw, Rhiannon Dixon. Rhiannon Dixon, who's going to be returning to action on the undercard of Maxie Hughes versus Kid Galahad. Co-main event to that main event, Terry Harpier versus Hannah Rankin, this weekend's Matchroom show. Rhiannon is coming off that win over amateur standout Majuba Ubtil, a career best win, if I do say so myself. And the story seems to be she's supposed to be facing experienced journeywoman Edina, who, much like Deborah Rengifo, has been around the block with just about anybody and everybody. Anybody from Michaela Mayer to Amanda Serrano to Nina Menke. I mean, you name it. Sporting a professional record of 15 wins and 15 losses. This ain't her first rodeo. One of those fighters to where it's almost a rite of passage for any unbeaten up-and-comer, any promising fighter that exhibits a high ceiling like Rhiannon Dixon. It's almost a rite of passage to at least have fought Edina at least once. You know, similar situation with Karina Kopinska and Bohana Lipizuska, Deborah Rengifo if you're in Central America. Rhiannon Dixon's going to be taking her on. Rhiannon Dixon, who was in action in May of this year against then unbeaten Majuba Ubtil. And that wasn't a showcase fight. That wasn't a showcase fight against Majuba Ubtil. I mean, Rhiannon Dixon was really up against it because young Rhiannon, who's only 27 years old, she doesn't come from a deep amateur background. Majuba Ubtil does. And the way that Rhiannon performed in that fight, you would have thought that she was the blue chip prospect in the amateur standout. Right Hook City. Young Rhiannon Dixon from
Wigan, Lancashire.
She wasn't just fighting Majuba Ubtil in there. She was fighting an over-officiating ref who was on her case the whole night. He's really riding Rhiannon Dixon's ass in that fight. But I'll tell you something. Even an over-officiating ref didn't stop Rhiannon Dixon from securing the W. She looked absolutely sensational. Her money punch in that entire fight was the right hook. The short right hook, mid-range to inside. I think Rhiannon Dixon should play around with the idea of changing her name to Right Hook Rhiannon. A fan-friendly fighter with a fan-friendly style and somewhat of a mean streak that's actually the opposite of what you get when you actually talk to Rhiannon. I've had Rhiannon on the channel here at least once.
Sparkling personality, very friendly, very chatty. You'd never know she can beat girls up as bad as she can beat girls up.
She can really beat girls up. You know, her last fight, that wasn't a showcase fight, but a fight with Edina Kiss, that is. This is a more manageable situation than what Rhiannon Dixon faced opposite the ring with Jubub Til. This fight might actually end in a knockout off a right hook, I'd say, off a right hook. That is if Rhiannon Dixon doesn't just start to unload and the referee decides to stop this thing. But in any event, I'm going with Rhiannon to win.
This weekend on the undercard of Maxie Hughes versus Kit Galahad.
In men's heavyweight news, there seems to be trouble in paradise in reference to what's supposed to be a Dillian Whyte versus Daniel Dubois showdown. Fight discussions have hit a stumbling block, now unlikely for November 26th. The rumored fan-friendly domestic heavyweight clash between Daniel Dubois and Dillian Whyte is unlikely to occur next. Dubois and Whyte were in negotiations for a November clash on BT Sport box office, but No Smoke Boxing understands that the parties are unable to agree on the financial terms. Sources tell NSB that Whyte requested a package of $3 million for the bout, an offer that Queensberry Promotions' Frank Warren has refused to accommodate. Queensberry's offer to Whyte for Dubois is understood to be significantly less.
Based on the current conversion rate, 3 million pounds sterling to US dollars comes out to 3.4 million.
3.4 million in US dollars. And once again, we're hearing a familiar tune that Old Fish Eyes Frank Warren is undervaluing Dillian Whyte, even though Dillian's been at the box office more times than any of his other fighters.
Save Tyson Fury.
Though Tyson Fury is not a party to this set of negotiations, Daniel Dubois is. And Daniel Dubois hasn't been at the box office more times than Dillian Whyte, even coming off a loss. Dillian Whyte is actually the one that's bringing all the marquee value to this fight, not young Daniel. NSB has learned that the most likely option for Dillian Whyte now is to sign a multi-fight deal with Ben Shalom's boxer to be an A-side fighter on Sky Sports box office moving forward, although this has not been finalized. Dubois is still expecting to headline on November 26th at the O2 Arena, but it is likely to be a regular BT Sport offering and not the pay-per-view platform a Whyte fight would have been on. Martin Bacoli is one of the heavyweights offered to Dubois' next contest. Swedish southpaw Otto Wallin was also rumored to be a potential opponent due to Dan Raphael's report that Jarrell Miller could box on the card. Both fighters are with Dmitry Salita. Brooklyn's own bad boy. Jarrell Miller, who's reintegrating himself back into the sport of boxing, inch by inch, piece by piece, fight by fight.
Jarrell Miller, who posted this by way of his own social media, saying he's set to return to action early next month on the 2nd in Kazakhstan.
Interesting particulars in association to what's supposed to be this ring return for Jarrell Miller. The fight, whoever it's supposed to be against, it's not yet registered on BoxRec. And given that things aren't working out between Dillian and Daniel, do you get the sense that maybe old Frank Warren, old Fish Eyes, might have offered Jarrell?
Do you think Frank might have offered Jarrell the Daniel Dubois fight?
Jarrell Miller won't drive as hard a bargain as a Dillian Whyte when you think about it. Jarrell Miller is trying to piece back together what's left of his career after a roughly 2-year hiatus.
You know, enough time has passed since Jarrell Miller's last performance-enhancing drug fiasco.
And I don't think people are going to be too up in arms to see him boxing on a major platform. I mean, Lucas Brown, Alexander Povetkin, Luis Ortiz. These fighters, like Jarrell Miller, they've tested positive for banned substances on more than one occasion, and they ended up boxing on major platforms anyway. So Jarrell Miller, he's no different. He returned to action after a 2-year hiatus in June of this year, and he's boxed 2 times since then. Once in June, then again in July.
According to Jarrell Miller's social media, he's supposed to be returning to action early next month on the 2nd, over there in Kazakhstan.
But against who, I don't know, since the fight does not appear on his BoxRec. So is it possible that that plan to travel to Kazakhstan was called off in order to participate on this Frank Warren show, on this Frank Warren card? And is it also possible that Frank offered him the Daniel Dubois fight? Because Jarrell Miller, disgraced fighter that he might have been or might still be, he's still an unbeaten fighter. His oath is still intact. and people will remember him. He's a guy who's got a lot of personality, talks a lot, I mean a lot of fucking shit.
Yeah, but he can really sell a fight.
Yeah, he can.
He's real fat, too.
He's got man boobs.
They mentioned Martin Bakole. They mentioned Otto Wallin. Those are high-risk, low-reward opponents for Daniel Dubois.
And as strange as this might sound, I don't necessarily think they'd get the same attention for Daniel Dubois' next fight that Jarrell Miller would, that Jarrell Miller could. He's a better trash talker than they are, and people will remember what happened between him and Anthony Joshua. You get the sense that, you know what, Jarrell Miller, he might have burnt bridges with Matchroom, and he might have burnt bridges with Top Rank, but over there in the UK, hey, you gotta expand your horizons sometimes to find new opportunities, better ones. Maybe Frank can put this guy to good use. As far as Dillian Whyte potentially signing to Sky Sports and Boxer, that bit of information, that bit of intel comes as no surprise to me because I told you guys that might happen.
Frank Warren is once again undervaluing Dillian Whyte. Doesn't want to give him 300 pounds sterling for this fight.
Might recall that he didn't want to acquiesce to Dillian Whyte's financial demands before. That led to Frank Warren, going to a purse bid for the Fury versus Whyte fight, and he had to bid a lot of money just to keep the rights for it. Here we are once again. Frank's undervaluing that guy. Dillian Whyte don't need Frank Warren or Daniel Dubois to get at 3 million pounds. He really doesn't. He can get it 3 million pounds on Matchroom. He can get it 3 million pounds on Sky.
But the story's supposed to be that the Sky Sports deal is not yet finalized. Interesting particulars in association with Dillian Whyte.
Eddie Hearn very recently said, the plan for Dillian Whyte is to fight in November and AJ fight in December. Now, we all know that AJ's supposed to be all wrapped up in that Tyson Fury situation.
I don't want to be presumptuous. That's what's going on, right?
Right. The chronology of these stories, this plan to get Dillian Whyte back out there in November, according to Eddie Hearn. I actually heard about this story before this recent news about things falling apart between Dillian and Daniel and Dillian potentially going over to Sky Sports and Boxer, but that deal's not finalized yet. Dillian has options.
You could do Dillian Whyte versus Filip Pergovic on the Matchroom side of things, or you could do Dillian Whyte versus Zhilei Zhang.
You very well could. Matchroom may still have one or two options over there for Dillian Whyte. Sky Sports and Boxer, he'd pretty much be the A-side to every heavyweight in their stable. That's Huey Fury, that's Michael Hunter.
Would say Joseph Parker, but he already beat Joseph Parker, and Joseph Parker's fighting Joe Joyce this weekend anyway, so even though Sky signed him,
he ain't got nothing to do with this conversation.
The bottom line here is that irrespective of a Daniel Dubois fight, Dillian Whyte has options, and that's because in the United Kingdom, he's box office. If Frank Warren doesn't want to accommodate him, somebody else will.
And finally, it appears what was supposed to be the IBF final eliminator between Joshua Buatsi and John Pascal, it appears that has fallen apart as a result of Joshua Buatsi not returning the contract in time. Now, boxing insiders seem to be speculating that we may instead end up seeing Joshua Buatsi versus Callum Smith.
a fight that, according to Joshua Buatsi, he was already offered.
A final eliminator for Beterbiev, but obviously, we're expecting the fight with Beterbiev Yard at the start of next year. Who knows what will happen there? But look, if titles can't be made, and that ain't possible, could you see yourself getting in the ring with Callum Smith? Is that another fight that you're happy to make?
I mean, that's been proposed to me. If I was Smith and I won a WBC final eliminator, would I fight anyone like myself? I wouldn't. And I could sit here and be like, yeah, man, let's get Smith, let's make the fight happen. But I know it's not going to happen. So it is what it is. And for the reasons, like I said, man, you've won a final eliminator. You don't need to fight me. Go fight whoever's got the belt. So, it's one of them ones.
That soundbite from Joshua Buatsi himself is from over 2 weeks ago, and in his own words, that fight was proposed to him, but he was less than optimistic that the Callum Smith people would go through with it, because Callum Smith is the WBC's mandatory challenger. Why gamble that on Joshua Buatsi? That's how he felt about it.
That's what he figured the Callum Smith people would tell themselves.
But I'll tell you something, even with Callum Smith being the WBC's mandatory challenger,
he's not on the eve of getting that fight with Artur Beterbiev. He's not on the eve of getting that title shot because we know that upon Artur's return, he's going to fight Anthony Yarde next, his mandatory challenger by way of the WBO. Could be a while before the WBC order Artur to take on Callum Smith. So what's he going to do in the in-between time when he's already lost enough time?
Callum Smith really isn't as active as he should be.
There's a significant amount of time in between the Lenin Castillo knockout and the more recent Matthew Bowder-Leak knockout. Callum Smith is proving to be a very dangerous and formidable light heavyweight, but he needs to be more active. He needs to be busy. And a fight with Joshua Buatsi, defending that mandatory status against him, it's just what the doctor ordered for both boys.
On the Joshua Buatsi side of things, the rewards are about the same as fighting Jean Pascal.
The whole point of fighting Jean Pascal in that eliminator was in order to become Artur Beterbiev's mandatory challenger. Well, if you fight Callum Smith, it's the same deal, just by way of a different alphabet organization in what would be, comparatively, a bigger fight. In the United Kingdom, Callum Smith is a bit more well-known than Jean Pascal.
I'm not telling you he's Julio Iglesias over there. I'm just telling you he has more of a following in the UK than Jean Pascal.
Jean Pascal is a Canadian-based, Haitian-born fighter.
They can do Buatsi versus Smith on the matchroom side of things, which wouldn't require Joshua Buatsi to box on BT in Queensbury.
Lest we forget, when Lou DiBella managed to win the purse bid for this thing, which was strange enough, it seems to have been his plan to deliver that fight to Old Fish Eyes Frank Warren so they could air it on BT and Queensbury.
If you're a matchroom fighter, you don't want to box on a Queensbury promotion show.
You're not the house fighter over there, so you won't get the house treatment. If you're Joshua Buatsi, a fight with Callum Smith is actually a bigger and better fight, at least in the UK it is, than a Jean Pascal fight would be.
That's assuming he actually fights Callum Smith. I don't want to speak too soon.
Not too soon, because the fight's not made yet, but according to Joshua Buatsi, it was something they proposed to him, and perhaps they got those wheels in motion, thereby explaining why Joshua Buatsi's not fighting Jean Pascal anymore.
One fight is just as good as the other. Hell, one fight's a little better than the other.
The reward is just about the same.
Mandatory status, so that might be how this cookie crumbles.